Well, moving on to an item that has featured quite heavily in some of our programmes over the past day or two, and that is the McGill Summer School in Glenties in County Donegal. They've extended their programme and increased the number of female participants, and it's after they faced criticism over the gender balance of the event. Now, the founder and organiser of the summer school, Joe Mulholland, said that he tried his best to achieve balance in this year's lineup. The event had been criticised earlier this week for having about 20% of female representation in its panel events. So to discuss the future of work and trying to achieve gender equality and balance at public events, I'm joined in studio by Peter Cosgrove, future of work expert, and also Larissa, Nolan, journalist. You're both very welcome.
Thank you.
Just first of all, the whole, I suppose, furore that featured this week over the McGill Summer School. Peter, what was your view?
My view was, given the forum, and I was looking at the website, is around economic, social policy, and the whole year was about the future of Ireland in the new Europe. It seems like a pretty dramatic kind of statement to say and then say, oh, well, we weren't able to find enough women for this. I would imagine this is something that they'd organised more than a few months in advance. And to be honest, at best, I would call this lazy. At worst, I'd say it's a little bit of an old boys club where, you know, the people we know best are the people we're going to get for this, as opposed to even thinking about it. But I honestly don't think, in my own view, that he really thought about this until it was mentioned to him, because when you saw the initial picture of all the white men, Twitter, yeah. I think that was when it came to his view that maybe this was a bit wrong. Yeah,
and I know the organisers of the event said that, you know, they did try to have as many women as possible. Certain difficulties had to be taken into account, and I suppose we know the comments that followed after that. But just, Larissa, in general terms, what was your own view?
Well, when I see things like this, you know, I look at it and I think, am I actually going mad here? You know, because it seems to me like some kind of mass hysteria going on that you know, there's a certain group of people who at the moment are so intent on finding wars where they can, you know, out of nothing, that they'll look at something and they'll say, oh, we can make an issue of this. Like, nobody's asking actually the questions. For example, you know, what women said no and why did they say no? You know, I saw Dr. Elaine Byrne was saying that she refused it because she had other work on, and, you know, she described it as official Ireland talking to itself. Maybe women didn't actually want to be on it. I mean, I do a lot of these.
Do we know that other women, or how many other women, I wonder, were asked to participate?
Well, shouldn't we actually find out these things first of all, and why they said no, before we start running around and pointing fingers at Joe Mulholland? I mean, to actually say, you know, to make it out like this was some sort of conspiracy theory that there's no women involved in these things, to me is absolute nonsense. I mean, it's class A manure. Honestly, that's what it comes across to me. Summer silly season, whatever it's called, stuff. You know, it's also completely covering over all the positive things about women at the moment, which are the fact that we're outstanding in law, we're outstanding in academia, we're outdoing men in things like medicine, veterinary, accountancy, all those kind of things. So maybe women have other things to be doing than going to this kind of boring summer school. And, you know, I honestly think, as a person who's on a lot of panels and who's asked a lot, because it's often said to me, it's very hard to get women onto these things.
Yeah, and you know, I think you know, even any producer of programmes, radio, television, will regularly say that, and for whatever the reason is, I don't know. I mean, as you know, as a female, from time to time, I'm asked to participate in things, not at any mad or great level. You know, I know other people obviously are, particularly if they're very high profile, etc.
Yeah.
But for instance, Glenties in Donegal, for anyone that's not familiar with it, I don't live. My home place isn't terribly far away from it. You know, it's a long drive if you're coming from Dublin, for instance. A lot of people may not want to make the journey. There's obviously maybe for remuneration if you're not a public representative, etc. Time out, maybe people have holidays. Who knows? There could be 100 different reasons. But just Peter, on that, like, do you think, was it, I suppose, overly...
Well, I know that I'm going into organisations now, and if you look at what the UK did, 11% of women are on boards in Ireland 5 years ago. We've moved to 13%. In the UK, they moved from 11% to 27% because they targeted it and they made companies do something about it. Up to then, the UK said the same thing. It's just not possible. Some of the phrases were, you know, some of these positions are very challenging, so we don't think women would be interested in these positions. The CEO of Qatar Airlines came out last week saying, you know, a position of a woman CEO, it's just a bit difficult for someone like that. So I just think in today's day and age, there are still people at a senior level getting away with saying things that they think are okay, which just aren't okay. This clearly, in my view, he knew what he was doing. He said, let's just make it easy. Yeah, it is more difficult to get women. But actually, all the companies are realising if you want a better balanced board, if we want a better Ireland, we need more women at a senior level. Yeah. To do that, right now it is definitely more difficult. But that doesn't mean you just go out and go, well, we give up. We're not.
Yeah, well,
try.
okay, well, and I suppose the reason we're discussing this today is part of a wider conversation. The McGill story has been well documented and covered. Obviously, the organisers apologised for comments that were made and have now said they're going to increase and extend the programme, etc., and female participation. But just moving on for that, I'm curious as to, say you're the organiser of an event, or there's other summer schools that take place as well across the country, maybe in August or September or October. Does this now mean, Peter Cosgrove, that every event organiser is going to have to, they're going to have to sit down now and say, hang on a second, if we've got 10 men on a panel, are we going to need 10 women? Do we have enough topics that cover, all of the different issues? Do we have gender equality on every panel?
So what people do in this is they turn around and go, this is ridiculous. Now we need 50-50 for everything. It should be about the debate. But actually, even saying that, it's kind of, to me, a bit ridiculous. Go, oh God, if we get all these women on, we're going to lower standards. That's essentially what they're saying. The reality is you don't need to have 50-50, but you do need to come out and say, look, we've got about 75% men, 25% women, so we are challenged getting enough women on this. But at least if you recognise it, it's fine. It's this idea that people are after the fact going, oh, we just weren't able to do it. That's just rubbish. They weren't able to do it because they didn't bother.
Larissa, Nolan.
You could pick up anything like that. For example, like I've done a random survey in my area of all the bin men, and they're all 100% men. If you look at educators, they're near 90% women. I mean, as I said earlier on in the medical ground, there's different people go for different things. And what we're talking about there then is prioritising the equality of outcome over the equality of opportunity. So when I'm talking about that there is saying that, equality opportunity obviously supports whereby everyone starts off on a level playing field and there's no discrimination and everyone then goes for it. But equality of outcome is saying, we must all be, there must be the equal numbers, 50-50, no matter what position that you've started from. That's basically just introducing quotas for the sake of optics. I mean, that does nobody a good service. And specifically as a woman, I find that insulting. Joe Mulholland said initially his instinct was to say we didn't find people with the aptitude, and everybody suddenly got terribly offended by that. I'll happily say I don't have the aptitude personally to be on the McGill Summer School. I don't find that.
Why not?
I just don't have in this particular case. I haven't got a great political background. I haven't done the work to merit getting on it. I'm meriting being on Newstalk right now. But I don't. There are other things I don't have the aptitude for, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that, and I'm confident with saying that.
I suppose so. There's probably plenty of other female representatives, as in TDs, senators, from various different walks of life that would feel and that do have the aptitude, and maybe for whatever reason, some of the messages I'm just looking at even already, people are saying that sometimes women might feel a little bit apprehensive about putting their hand up or asking to participate or actually wanting to participate. Sometimes they might just need a little bit more encouragement. That just comes in from one listener. I know that I would be somebody who would probably need my arm twisted a little bit from time to time to participate and do things. It's not that I'm not able, it's just that you need, sometimes a bit more encouragement.
Well, absolutely. I think we all do that, both men and women. But when you look at politics itself, what is it, like 20% of women are in politics and about 20% of women were at this political summer school. So, I mean, it's actually really not that odd that he couldn't find very many women, because the percentages are the same. Motherhood, raising children, going all the way up to Donegal possibly could be an issue for some people. I mean, that's something that people don't really talk about that much. I mean, I know it certainly would be something that would prevent me doing... not necessarily. Women tend to take over most of that role. And also then you have single parents like myself who don't have that other option. So, I mean, for example, that would be something that would prevent me, and I presume would prevent a lot of women.
How far do we have to go now, I suppose, for gender balance, Peter Cosgrove?
Well, for me, anytime I do any talks on this, people come up to me and go, this is ridiculous, Peter. It's just about the best person for the job. And actually, that's just not enough. Men don't realise, privilege is invisible to those who have it, and white men have all the privilege. So the reality is they work with other white men, they promote people like themselves. It ends up being a massive echo chamber. People will even admit this once you start highlighting it to them. So all of these people will go up there, and the people they hang around with, the groups they hang around with, it doesn't have to be an old boys club. It's done unconsciously. So the reason every business is running through massive unconscious bias programs right now is people are realising we don't even know that we're doing this. Job specs are written the wrong way. Performance appraisals, women are getting emotional feedback and men are getting factual feedback. And this is data that they're doing. Thousands and thousands of surveys are showing that actually we are treating people differently. So all we're trying to say is treat the woman as a professional, not as a woman. And I think there's this conversation that you're a woman and therefore maybe kids are going to be a factor. Well, kids are going to be a factor.
Yeah.
So I think
not as much though. Just generally, it's not as much of a factor as it is for women, because when kids are sick at night, when they want to get up, if you have a small baby, biology will dictate that you're the one who has to do the breastfeeding, for example.
That is is starting to change. And what's happening, interestingly, is in more families now,
Not
the
the breastfeeding
woman
one.
is the main breadwinner. And actually, men are going to have to realise that that's the way things are changing, right? So it's going to have to be more equal. And a lot of people would say the reason you want parental leave is for the first child, for a man and a woman, the guy should be off just as much as a girl, so they both understand how to raise the first child. Because once the first child is done, at least they have an idea, whereas a man's usually missing for that.
We'll just turn men into women then, and then everything will be sorted out when we do that. But there's one thing, Peter, that we don't tend to bring up in these conversations that I would just like to bring up is, for example, in the situation with CEOs and the gender pay gap and all those kind of things, nobody ever seems to mention that the gender pay gap in Ireland for people aged 30 and under is actually zero. It's hovering at 0%. It doesn't exist. It only kicks in the 30s, which is exactly the year when the decade when women have children. So that it's directly, even the experts will tell you, it's directly correlated to that.
Would it not be a case though that when, like, up to your, you know, when you're kind of early to mid to late 20s, whatever industry you might start out working in, everybody is starting with zero experience. If you're the 22-year-old male or female who comes out of college, everyone starts on the whatever the figure is as the primary school teacher or whatever. It's when people start to move through the ranks, and the facts and the figures will show that they're moving up the ladder.
Yeah, but I can explain that as well. It also comes down to motherhood. The Central Statistics Office experts have explained this to me. It's because once women have children, they start making choices themselves, for example, to go part-time, to take maternity leave, which is perfectly there, a valid choice to do so. And often the main problem that we have, I think, in the workplace is women don't go for promotion because they're thinking, oh, look, I won't get that balance of work-life family. So what the solution to all this is, in my view, is making the workplace a more accommodating, a more facilitatory place for people, whoever is the main parent, be it the man or the woman. It is genuinely the woman mostly.
I just want to bring you in on that, Peter, I suppose, because in your kind of usual day job when we speak to you here, it's usually around, you know, work, advice, recruitment, etc. So how do you think businesses and companies and event organisers can try to, you know, strive to achieve
firstly,
that?
there's no gender pay gap at the 30 degree, and women generally do better than men in the workforce. But actually, one of the key statistics is women have opted out of their own workforce way before anything to do with kids, because they actually look at the top and they go, there's 11 men up there, there's one woman, my chances of getting to the top are really small. I don't see myself at the top. You can't be what you cannot see. So a lot of them have opted out way before. One of the big technology firms did a study on this, and they realised, they all left because of maternity leave, and then they went on LinkedIn and they realised, actually they didn't. They just left us because we didn't give them any accommodation. I completely agree, though. It's still more of a challenge for women than it is for men because of the current family situation. So one thing, so back to in terms of what companies can do, they actually have to start this from the point of view of building in not processes where they go, we're going to offer maternity leave and flexibility. They have to actually practice what they preach. If your senior management team never take flexible working or never take maternity or parental leave, no one below them will feel they can take it. Secondly, if someone takes maternity leave, it shouldn't be a punishment. So therefore, when they come back to the workplace, they're actually having to beg for their job again. And that happens. And that's why no man's going to take paternity leave. People are now offering it. No man's going to take it because they're going to go into a room with another man. He's going to go, that's career suicide. No one will say it publicly, but if that's what's happened to date, so we need to change cultures of organisations so they realise we actually need the man and the woman working, because actually, guess what? We've already got full employment.
Okay, let me just go to some of our listeners, their comments and queries. Robin RD says, the comments from the event organisers at McGill that they couldn't get women of aptitude, that's what caused the outrage. Hi Andrea, I agree that this comes in from Lorcan. I agree that McGill should balance things up, but so should other events, the likes of Inspire Fest or Women in Leadership. Look at their gender balance, where men are underrepresented? ? Do threatened boycotts actually help this discussion? This listener says, a text on the gender, surely the gender pay cap should never exist. Another listener says, we all know that men of a certain age, they say 25 to 40, are more likely to get hired over a woman. This listener says, I'm tired of women playing the victim card. There are a lot of women-only events out there and men don't complain. I'm a woman myself and I'm tired of some women portraying themselves as victims. Peter, any thoughts on those?
Well, I think the biggest challenge, honestly, when I talk to some women, so take topics like gender quotas, they get very angry about it, and the first thing they say is, I never needed this. And I think what you need to understand about this discussion, you need to take yourself out of yourself. You mightn't have needed because you might have won the social lottery, that you've worked with parents who praised and gave you an amazing upbringing, or you might have come from a really poor background, but you've got the biological lottery where you had incredible resilience, and no matter where you were always going to make it. Not everybody is you. Not everybody is your background. So just because you made it to the top top without any support doesn't mean that means everyone's going to make it. And this is the argument everybody used. Just because I was able to do it, everyone else should be. That's not the case. There's a lot of people out there who need support for loads of reasons. Men and women. There's men out there with challenges as well who feel they can't say it because they go, men aren't allowed to say it.
Yeah, and actually somebody's correcting me on that on the text machine here. They're saying, Andrea, men also sometimes need their arms twisted to be encouraged to do things too.
Yeah, but all the studies will say when it comes to promotions, men will go for a role if they've about 60% of the job spec, women need about 90. That's about neuroscience, and that's because of hundreds of years of social evolution. So companies need to understand you do need to pull more women out than men, and that's nothing to do with favoritism. It's just to do with the way society is.
Yeah, but there's also the issue of forcing people into things that they mightn't necessarily want to do. You know, like, I mean, maybe they just don't want to do these things, or maybe they don't want to do the summer schools, or they don't want to pick the jobs. So I think we have to be very conscious of, you know, as I said earlier on, validating whatever women's choices are, whether it be, you know, some people want to stay in the home and raise kids, and, you know, that's as much of an achievement as getting to the top as the CEO. Can
I just ask you, Peter, just from your own kind of professional experience, in terms of that kind of gender bias, is there a classic age as to when that starts?
I would say up to manager level in most organisations. So if you look at professional services organisations, all the accounting law firms, everything's absolutely balanced up to manager level because they've done all their data. It's when it gets to the next level. And even when people talk about, we've a number of partners who are female versus male, it's actually the real question is how many equity partners do you have if you're male or female. So it's really, everything is usually okay up to manager level. And there is definitely, Larissa's got a point, there is definitely a maternity issue there. There's no question. I always say, if this is about gender equity, we need the equivalence of life outcomes. We can't have the exact same thing for men and women because we are different.
Absolutely.
But it's just, there are also women out there going, I don't have children, I don't want to have children, or I want to have them later. It shouldn't affect my career even if I want to have children. But I think that's a society.
Let me just bring some of our listeners in. If you don't mind, folks, just popping on your headphones. Larissa, Nolan and Peter Cosgrove on our here for our discussion today on gender equality and where it's going and how far do we have to go to try and strive to achieve it. John is one of our listeners who's on the line. John, what do you make of this discussion?
Well, obviously it's interesting and it's salient. I mean, everybody's talking about it and all sorts of things. I mean, the way I look at it is I'm a father of, I've raised two children to be young adults, teenagers, and I have one boy, one girl, and I've exposed them to the exact same experiences, education, and I don't discriminate between one and the other, and I would expect none of them to go further or less far than the other.
Yeah.
However, just in the context of this event and what seems to have sparked this conversation today, and how a number of people should have been invited, or a greater number of women should have been invited to be on the top table or whatever it is, if discrimination can be looked at two ways: picking people because of stuff, or not picking people because of stuff. So if there was 100 people eligible to be good speakers at this, making 50% of them women is a form of discrimination against merit. And surely that's what we should be teaching people. You go on your ability, you go on your skills, you go on your experience. And man or woman shouldn't actually affect the decision at all. But now that you actually make it part of the decision, you're actually interfering with merit and achievement. That's my perspective of it.
Okay. Well, look, listen, John, thanks for joining us on the line. That's John, who says he's a parent of two kids, both male and female. Actually, we'll just take maybe another listener for the moment before we go back to our panel. I think we have Jane is on line too. Jane, good afternoon.
Yes, hi, Andrea.
What's your view on this, Jane?
Well, my view, I suppose, I have 4 children myself, but I feel it really lies in flexibility at, you know, you can give out about what's happening at the upper levels, but I think you have to address it at the, you know, medium levels or the lower levels, and make it easier for women to stay in the workforce. I mean, there are so many talented women who would love reduced hours or some degree of flexibility, but just can't commit to full-time hours for the stage in life they're at. And I think if you keep them engaged at that level, you have a much better chance then of, you know, when they go past a certain point in life, it's easier for them to get back in and contribute. And I think we really need that with full employment approaching.
So employers need to create the environment that encourages that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research suggesting that actually people can be more productive using part-time hours. I have a business called parttime.ie, and, you know, more and more evidence is pointing to the fact that actually, you know, you don't have to work 40 hours to be you don't have to work the full 40 hours. Like, you know, you can. There's evidence to suggest that over a certain age, people are more productive. You know, maybe at 30 hours or whatever. And there's so many women who are dying to get back into the workforce if the roles are made available. But unfortunately, that's just not quite happening yet.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Jane, for that. We will come back to that point as well. I'm just going to stay with our listeners again. That number is 1890 453 106. Glenn is on the line. Glenn, what's your thoughts on all of this?
How you doing? I'd just like to say that, I think we need to take note of what your woman panel member was saying there earlier. There is a mass hysteria, and I don't think it's just summertime. I think this has been going on for the last year or so, and it's continuing. I mean, I find it quite ironic that the male person on your panel is the one who's peddling
Larissa, Nolan and Peter Cosgrove. Yeah, that's our panel
today. Peter, who's speaking there, is the one who's peddling the feminist agenda, and the woman who's on your panel, I've forgotten her name.
Larissa, Nolan. Yeah.
Larissa. I think she's the more reasonable one. She's talking about, that there is a difference in the biology as well. And this does have a factor. I mean, this has been reduced to insignificance at the moment in current public discourse. There is significance in biology. There is a significance in choices that women make with regard to having children, and they are the ones who will have to get up in the night and breastfeed, and that was brushed over as well. I mean, it needs to be recognised. Man is not going to become woman, and woman is not going to become man. That is just something that is unchangeable.
Okay.
Of course, there have been historical issues around discrimination of women going into the workplace. That is totally recognised and needs to be addressed. But ignoring the fact of biology is not going to change society in any progressive fashion. All it's going to do is going to force everybody into the workforce, into the labour force, who cannot afford to meet driving the cost of their homes through the roof, and they're not going to be able to afford to live. They can't live at the moment. Look at the homelessness that we're dealing with.
Okay.
And this is further being made drastic at the end of the year when there's the proposal for a new referendum on the position
of the women in the
home. Importance of the women in the home.
Yeah.
Now, if that the majority of politicians were surveyed on that, and it was agreed that it needs to be changed.
Okay.
Now, 98% of them voted that it should be changed to recognise the role.
Yeah, well, we might come back maybe to that at a separate stage, Glenn, if you don't mind, just because I suppose it's a different issue. I just want to return to some of the points that were raised there by yourself, by Jane and by John. Glenn, thanks for making contact with us. Peter Cosgrove, according to Glenn, you're peddling the feminist agenda.
Well, I love the fact that it's the panel. It's not just data. Actually, if you look at all the data, looking at all the first guy who talked about merit, the reality is if we're saying it's merit, for 500 years all men were CEOs. All men were in the corridors of power. So does that mean we always had merit and therefore we should never let women in? Or maybe we never had merit. It's a good change. So this idea that we've always had merit and now that some women are getting to the top, this is ridiculous. It's not a meritocracy. We're just letting women in. Well, then were we not letting men in for 500 years? So I think people kind of get this wrong. They want meritocracy to start today as opposed to the fact that we've got massive amounts of organisations which are male heavy.
Okay.
The flexibility bit, I just think we talked about women and flexibility. We need to talk about people and flexibility. Like, it's not women and flexibility. And honestly, peddling the agenda, the reality is Everybody Lies, a book that came out this year about Google, shows that men still and women still will type in, is my son a genius, twice as often as is my daughter a genius. So we think we're giving people exactly the same thing. And we will say, hand on heart, I give my kids the exact same experience. It's not. It's unconscious. It's because of society. So people are doing their best, but we need to have these conversations because both men and women should be whatever they want to be, and not what Glenn said, that men are men and women are women. Be what you want to be. And this idea that you have to be something because of biology, I think that's not the case.
Let me just bring in just Larissa finally on that, on some of those points raised there by our guests.
Well, I think we have to acknowledge that women have a thing called a maternal instinct, which makes us want to be at home a lot of the time with our children, and we should never apologise for that. That's actually a really good thing and helps to raise, an excellent next generation, which is arguably the most important job in the world. I think, the point that I think was Jane made a point about giving women the options. I mean, literally everybody I know, you can say in reality, you can say, oh, men help out, la la la. In reality, what actually happens is it's the women who take the hit when it comes to going back to work, and you have all these issues of guilt and all these pressures on you to be the perfect mother, and then you're feeling bad because you're not as good at home as you should be, and you're not as good in work as you should be. So what you end up doing is you do end up going part-time. Like, for example, in my case, I left journalism staff altogether and went out had to go right back to the start and work for myself. Now, if you looked at my gender pay gap there, it'd be stark, but sometimes you have to go back to get back to the work-life balance you have. And actually, I think women should be congratulated in this, because women, it seems, from what you were saying, Peter, that it's not just the motherhood issue that makes them maybe not go for that top job. Should we not possibly look at this like, why are we deciding that being at the very top of a corporate, is actually the pinnacle of achievement? Perhaps actually having a really good work-life balance, and not maybe going, I'll have to chase after that top job. Maybe actually women are more correct in choosing that, and that's actually their own choice.
Just two more texts on this. Maternity leave, no doubt, has a massive effect in women's careers. When you are out for roughly a year per child, it's so hard to get back on the ladder. When I went for a manager's role as an assistant manager, I was actually told that my maternity leave had, and they say in inverted commas, possibly affected my career. For example, I had been out for 2 years of the years in the past 4. I was also told, should I not just be happy as an assistant manager, as they're giving me family-friendly benefits, for example, parental leave, etc. I understood from this conversation that there was no way I was going any higher in the organisation whilst I had young kids and could possibly have another maternity leave. And finally, one more as well. For example, I had a boss who gave me, a man, stick for leaving on time to pick up my children. He never said anything to my female colleagues who always left in time to pick up their kids. The boss is a male who would consider himself, and viewed even by me, as a very modern, progressive man. Peter, any views on those two? And actually, sorry, it says as well, proof that it's subconscious.
Yeah, so it is. It's an unconscious. So when people say I don't have bias, you go, it's unconscious. We all do. You only have to type in the word CEO into Google and all the images are still of men, not women. So a 7-year-old girl looking at this are going to see a lot more pictures of men as CEOs. I completely agree with Larissa. The overall goal should not be that everyone needs to be a CEO, but the overall goal should be everybody should have the opportunity and not have this passive aggressive, oh, you might have kids or you mightn't want to do this or it might be too tough or too challenging for you. If they don't want it, they absolutely don't need to have it. But the idea that men have all the choice to be at home or to be at work, and they're a hero if they work flexible hours or pick up their kids, that should work both ways.
Okay, we're going to just very finally, Larissa,
that attitude
briefly.
might be passive aggressive, but actually when people return to the workplace with children or in those childbearing years, it can be an actually aggressive response from the employer, and it can be a hostile response, and that's the solution. That needs to change. Employers need to change their attitude. They need to be more accommodating and more flexible to women in childbearing years.
We'll leave it there for the moment, folks. We could spend a lot longer discussing this. It might be something that we will come back to again. My thanks to our listeners for making contact with us on this, and to Peter Cosgrove, also a future of work expert, and Larissa Nolan, journalist, for joining us in studio today.